Welcome to the Agile Talks again. In the same time, in the same date, we are here and we are trying to learn something from the Agile gurus. And today we will discuss with Scott Ambler, but before the start the session, let me give some inputs about our X session. We discussed with Lee, and who is the founder of PMP certification, and we discussed about the history of PMP certification and history of the PMI, and we talked about the PMP certification and agile world and the future of PMI. So today, again, we will discuss with Scott Ampler, and I want to invite him, and we will talk about agile data and agile modeling and discipline agile. Let's invite Scott. Welcome, Scott.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for accept my invitation. And this will be, I think, our second round, not the second round, but what we discuss with PMI Turkey chapter.
Yeah.
And we just talked about discipline agile in that part. But today I'm excited because while choosing the topics, you said me we need to put agile data, agile modeling, and architecture. So we will discuss new topics and different topics, and I'm excited to discuss about that topics. So let's start again the easiest question. This is my standard. Who is Scott?
Oh, who's Scott? Yeah, well, he's a totally awesome guy. So I've been in the process and IT space for since the late 1980s. So good 30 some odd years. I've done pretty much everything you can do in that space over the years, in a lot of domains. I've had the pleasure of working in a very wide range of organizations. I've been a consultant for many of those years, so I got around. But I focused a lot on the process space. And in the 90s, I was working on reasonably heavy reasonably heavy ways of working, CMMI based type stuff. I actually recently revisited some of that old work, just to blog about it. But anyways, I also did some work in the unified process. I was one of the thought leaders there for a long time. But then in the early 2000s, when the Agile Manifesto got written, I sort of jumped on that bandwagon because I knew most of the people, and I had been doing reasonably agile stuff up until that point. And I led the development of what became the Agile modeling methodology, which we'll talk about that later.
Mm-hmm.
And I also led the development of the Agile data method, which is really starting. Some of the techniques are gaining popularity with the data ops movement, which is good, and the Agile BI data warehousing movements as well. So the Agile data stuff was probably about 15 years ahead of its time, unfortunately. And then led the development of at IBM of Disciplined Agile delivery, working with Mark Lyons and others from outside of IBM to do that, which then eventually Mark and I wrote a book about that, and then we evolved it together into what became the Disciplined Agile Toolkit, which is now a property, intellectual property of PMI.
Great. And also, I'm happy about that because lots of people is saying, for example, in some cases, people are saying to me, lots of people is talking about agile, but they don't experience about software and the other topics like software architecture. So you have experience about architecture, agile data, and software, and maybe we can discuss about that topics, and
Yeah.
so we can try to find some answers to give some information that people. So
Yeah.
the second question, sorry, will be again the easy. And what is business agility for your perspective, from your
Yeah.
perspective?
So business agility is the ability of an organization to sense and respond to what's going on in their environment. In the case of a business, in the marketplace or marketplaces that they want to operate in, and to be able to react to what's going on, and in some ways predict what they believe to be happening in order to get ahead of the game. I actually prefer the term enterprise agility, though, rather than business agility. because I want to be more inclusive. It's a more inclusive term. Government agencies, for example, can also be agile, but they're not businesses. So business agility is sort of really an offensive term, at least for them. It's a great term, don't get me wrong, but it's not ideal for the government agencies of the world. And I've done work in that space, and they really are not comfortable with that term. So, but anyways, give you a hard time on that one.
Yeah, okay. I will use the enterprise agility in the next questions. So let's talk about again. Maybe 3 or 4 questions will be about discipline agile. So, what is discipline agile, and how can you and Mark find this discipline agile toolkit, and why discipline agile is toolkit, not framework?
Yeah, definitely. So Disciplined Agile, we like to say is a toolkit. So where the frameworks tend to tell you what to do, they prescribe what to do, even though all their marketing rhetoric claims they're not prescriptive. I would invite them to look the word prescription up in the dictionary. But anyways, be that as it may, DA is a toolkit. So what we do is we walk you through what to think about. What issues should you be considering? And then we present you with options. So instead of saying this is the one best practice to rule them all, because this is not Tolkien, right? It's not Lord of the Rings. There's no one best practice or collection of best practices. So what we instead say is here are some good options. And some not so good options in some cases. And you need to choose because you know what situation you're in, because you are unique. Your team is unique, your organization is unique. You have a unique context, which changes constantly, right? VUCA and all that good sort of stuff. So I don't know what situation you're in. So it would be just arrogant of me to tell you, here's the best practice for you. Because it's convenient. Don't get me wrong, but it wouldn't be accurate. So instead, we say here's some good options for you to address this issue, and here are the trade-offs of those options. And here are some references. If you want to go do further reading or watch a video or read a book or something. But here are your options. Here are the trade-offs. You know what situation you're in. So choose the technique that is best for you right now, given the situation that you actually face. So what's best for you, or what do you believe to be best for you? And then experiment with that. So instead of just blindly following a bunch of prescribed rules, here's the 13 practices of my method, follow these and the world will be your oyster. The world's not that simple. It never is, it never has been, never will be. And we all inherently know that. So stop looking for easy answers, because there are none. Instead, learn how to make better decisions. And that's what DA is all about. It's a toolkit to help you make better process-related decisions based on your context. Because you're not process experts. You probably never will be. And that's okay. But you still need to make good process decisions. So we need to go beyond this fail fast mentality. Like, failing fast is certainly better than failing slowly. But we can do better than that. You can improve upon, PDSA or PDCA, UDA, whatever it is that you're doing. Let's apply, when you apply process improvement to the process improvement strategy, you discover that it is possible to make better decisions. But you need to accept that. And then the DA toolkit gives you the information and the skills you need to do exactly that, so you can improve your improvement process.
Great. And I have question about, I have different type of experience about that toolkit. One of my experience, when I discussed with one executive, he or she said to me, okay, you are expert in about agile, you need to show the solution for us. You need to say, yeah, we need to go with this way or this way. I don't want to choose any option, because you are consultant. And when we face this situation, what's your suggestion?
Yeah, so that's okay, right? So you still need to. So then you have a conversation around, well, what are you trying to achieve? Where are you? Where are you currently? What can your people do? Who do I need to actually work with? Not you, but who's actually going to do the work here, right? So point me to the team that needs, that's actually going to do the work, and then I can coach you around making, I can coach them around making better decisions. So and help them to. Let's identify what should we try out now, in order to potentially improve, right? Because you still have to experiment. You
Mhm.
still have to you still have to try out a technique in your situation to see if it actually works for you, and then if it works, you adopt it, right? So, and yes, you want to do that in a fail fast mode, but the critical thing is making that initial decision. What should we experiment with?
Mhm.
And that's where you leverage the toolkit. Let's home in on something that's most likely going to work for us, rather than the one thing that I just read about in a blog, because the blogs never tell you, oh, here's like 10 options. They just tell you here's one, and it's the best practice on the planet. So no, that's just naive, right? Then that's it. So, but the challenge, though, which is what you're getting
Mhm.
at, is the executives want to be told what to do. The decision makers don't want to make decisions, and they're often not qualified to make those decisions. That's a phenomenally unfortunate observation, but it seems to hold true. And because they're not process, they're smart people, they're doing the best they can, but they're not process experts. They're almost always desperate for we need to improve, I need to get better, I need to make my quarter, whatever it is, whatever constraints they have and whatever pressures they have, and they're overwhelmed. They're just absolutely overwhelmed with all this process stuff and all the change they face, and they don't know who to listen to. They really don't understand what's going on. So they're desperate for an easy solution, and there isn't one.
Mhm.
And so I think, and this is, and to give the frameworks credit where it's due, they tend to present easier solutions, right? They say, well, here's the best way to doing things. Here's framework X, and just adopt framework X, and everything will be fine. And it's simply not true. And this is why, like, let's look at the success rates of agile transformations. They're really low. They're
Yeah.
really low. Like, there's like a 70 to, depending on who you talk to, there's somewhere between like a 70 and 90% failure rate on agile transformations. So we need to do better. We really do.
But lots of agile coaches are saying, okay, we need to be pragmatic and we are not following some frameworks. Lots of agile coaches are saying this. But in real life, they are trying to follow that framework because they don't know the other options. What do you think about that? What do you think about the agile coach's experience and knowledge?
Yeah, that's unfortunately seems to also be the case. And they often do, so when we talk in DA, when we talk about being pragmatic, what we're getting at is the goal is not to be agile. Like, who cares, right? What do you want, a little gold star? Is this kindergarten? Yeah, you're agile, nice pat in the head. It doesn't matter. What matters is, are we being effective? Are we doing the best we can? Have we found the best way of working right now for our situation? That's what you should really be aiming for. And sometimes that could be a very traditional way of working. And this is one of the things we do in the toolkit. Like earlier, I was saying, we have a bunch of really good practices, and we also have some not so good practices, and or not so effective practices. And the
Mhm.
reason why is some of those practices might be, even though they're not the most whiz bang thing around, they might in fact be the best approach for you right now in the situation that you face. Even though we would prefer not to, we prefer not to do it, but that is the best we can do right now. So fair enough. So we need to be pragmatic and realistic about that. So the challenge, I think, with a lot of the agile coaches is they don't have the experience, right? So they might have come up through the ranks because they were a good scrum master, and then they became a coach, or they got some lean certifications and they became a lean coach or whatever. But they don't have the background in some of the more traditional techniques. They don't have the background in outside of whatever box they came out of. So we like to talk about trying to be framework agnostic, and then like I hear coaches talk about this all the time, and then 5 seconds later they're talking about sprints and scrum masters.
Yeah.
Did you listen to what you were just saying? Like, and they don't get it, right? They don't get it, and that's okay. People are people. They're all on a learning journey, but you need to start looking outside of the box, and you need to, whatever box you're in, you got to look outside of it. And this is what we did in DA. We did a lot of the heavy lifting that the coaches, most of these coaches have not, are barely on the learning journey to pick this stuff up. And it's sadly the organization, these organizations that are hiring them are willing to fund their learning journey and doing it the hard way. Well, let's experiment with some random stuff and we'll fail fast, right? And that's the level they're at. It's like, well, no, let's not. Let's do a little bit of thinking and then fail fast, or better yet, succeed fast. But because we can make better decisions if you're humble enough to realize, and that's the thing, right? Like, so DA is all about recognizing that other people have already dealt with most of the challenges that you're currently facing today. There are solutions out there that work, and that can potentially work for you if you're willing to experiment with them. You don't need to relearn all the old stuff, right? Or you don't need to go through the entire learning process. You can jump ahead by jumping to what's more than likely going to work for you. So, in some ways, DA is like a coach in a box. That's the way Mark Lyons likes to talk about it a lot. But for a coach, DA is great because it gives you a knowledge base that you just simply don't have right now, and it will open your eyes to options. So when I used to do training in DA, you always get a wide range of people on a training course, but every so often you'd get a few people. I'm a Scrum Master and I've been doing this for years. I know everything there is to know. Yeah. Like, oh, dude, just saying that you're a Scrum Master right away tells you you're on the wrong end of the learning curve there. But you're good. You got to start somewhere. Good for you. But anyways, and then by the end of the first day, they'd be coming. Invariably, all these people that thought they knew everything and didn't need to be there because they already know everything, they come to me at the end of the day and they say, "Oh my, wow, I had no idea. Not only have you worked through potential solutions for problems that we've been struggling with for months, doing whatever it is we're doing, you gave us several options to do it. It's not as like, here's the one best practice. Here's like 5. Let's choose the best out of these 5, and we had no idea." It's like, yeah, I know. It's like that's the challenge. So a little bit of humility, could do wonders for some of these coaches. But yeah, it's hard. It's like they're human, right? And this is a complex world that we're in, and it takes a long, long time to learn this stuff. A couple of days of training and then a year or two of experience on an agile team does not qualify you to be a coach. Sorry.
Maybe we can say they will fail fast. Maybe not fast.
Maybe. Well, they're going to fail. Yeah, maybe not fast, but yeah, they're going to fail. That's for sure. But it's the analogy I like to use with coaches is I've got a young daughter, and if I wanted to help her learn how to play hockey or football or some sport. And assuming I know nothing about that sport, which is pretty good because I'm not a sporty guy, I would at least know how to hire a coach. So if I wanted to help her learn how to play football, I would know I need a football coach, not just a coach, but a football coach. And I would know I want to hear a story out of this person, how they've played football for years, how they were playing it when they were a kid and they're playing it in high school. And maybe they were on the city rep team and they played and they were hoping to be, get into the major leagues. But then unfortunately they blew out their knee. So now they can't play, or they got old, and they can't play as well anymore. And so now they're coaching, and they still love the sport, but they love working with kids. Blah blah blah. I would expect to see years of experience in whatever they're going to coach, and I would also expect years of experience working with existing coaches to learn how to become a coach, right? Because you don't just go from being a player to being a coach overnight, right? You're a junior coach and you're being mentored by other coaches and all. You've seen it in sports, right? I expect the same. It's not unreasonable to expect the same sort of thing out of agile coaches. Yet most organizations don't know enough to ask. They don't know. They would know to expect 15, 20 years of football experience from a football coach, but they don't seem to know that they should expect the same sort of thing for an agile coach.
And you said be pragmatic. And what does it mean, be pragmatic? And can you share one or two example about that be pragmatic part?
Yeah. So for example, so you have there's different ways of working.
Mm,
So say you were doing in a position we're doing contracting. So
mhm,
there's a customer organization and there's a service provider organization, and you've got to set up some, you got to procure services from this provider. There's different ways you can do that, right? So you can have a very traditional contracting process and put it out to bid and do an RFI and RFP and paperwork. Or you could have a very pragmatic conversation with them, and maybe bring in two or three contracting firms at once and have one discussion of, here's the problem that we're trying to solve, here's what we're trying to achieve. Now let's workshop it and figure out, here's how we're going to work together, potentially work together, and in a single afternoon or a day, we could come up with a strategy for moving forward with perhaps several contracting firms to help us do that. And that's a technique out of lean agile procurement, and that's something that we captured in the vendor management process blade in DA. And that strategy is one of many for doing procurement. It's one of the better ones, in my opinion. But like I said, there's also more traditional ways of doing things. You could have a short list of firms that you like to work with. You could
mhm,
have you could have existing contracts in place, right? So there's different ways that you can contract out work and procure work, for example, not just one. And so a pragmatic approach is, I would look at that and I would first understand my situation. What are we trying to achieve? What can the culture of my organization, what can we tolerate right now? How radical can we get?
mhm,
What skills do we have? Like, do we, it's easy to talk about lean agile procurement, but do we have the skills in house to actually pull that off? Because if my procurement team is staffed with traditional people, and I'm talking about this, crazy radical lean agile procurement stuff, um, how am I going to get them to the point where they can actually work their way through it and not mess it up? Right. So there's that sort of thing going on. So picking the right strategy now for the situation, and maybe pushing boundaries a bit, but not going absolutely crazy. Right. This is the challenge with a lot of the prescribed methods, is they've got one way of doing things, and the delta between what you're currently capable of and what they're talking about is just too big to bridge in some cases, right? We need to take baby steps,
mhm,
and I need to meet you halfway right now, and then a year or two from now, maybe we can do this. And that's something that when you start dealing with those realities,
mhm.
the frameworks start to fall apart on you, because there isn't one. It's not one size fits all anymore, and it's not this hand waving crap either, right? So it's like, it's the art of the possible. Yeah, but give me some advice. Like, help me make a decision, right? It's not, don't just tell me this is your framework is really awesome, and then just say, and we can do anything with this because it's totally awesome, and just hire me because I'm really smart. No. It's like, come on, I need some real advice. Help me solve this problem now. And then that brings complexity into the discussion, and that's not convenient.
Hmm.
you know
And yeah, what do you think about you said me the culture, and lots of people is talking about the culture, and lots of companies are saying, okay, we like Agile, we like Scrum, we like some frameworks, but our culture is not ready for that. So frameworks is well, but our culture, our company is bad. And lots of Agile coaches are saying, okay, your company is not ready, your company is not doing that because the problem is you, not frameworks. So
yeah,
what do you think? Yeah.
yeah, I agree with that. So it gets down to fit, right? So it's like, you've got to start where you are. You got to meet an organization or a team, whatever it is that you're coaching or trying to help, where they are. And so if you're here and you're trying to get here, that's a multi-step journey, right? It's not just, well, I'm going to give you training in this, and
Mhm.
I can give you 2 days of training in this, and then we're gonna start working like this, on Monday. it's not realistic. And this is, I think that, and it's these weird expectations that's actually going to work out for you, is one of the reasons why we see such a horrendous failure rate in the agile transformation world. So it really is, so I would argue that the lean community has a significantly better understanding of how to pull off change than the agile people do, because lean is because this idea of starting where you are and then incrementally improve from there, that's just straight out of lean. It's straight out of the lean playbook when it gets down to it. And that's what we adopted in DA, because that tends to work. Because you generally can't make these huge quantum leaps and pull them off, right? But that's what a lot of but if you only know one way of working, it gets back to the quality of your coaches again, right? If I only know how to do this, well, it's I've got a hammer, everything must be a nail now, right? We're going to teach you how to do this. Well, no, that's just not viable for right now for that organization. So why are you trying that?
Okay, yeah. And let's talk about the other topics and agile data and agile modeling and architectures. And also, I want to say hello, and also lots of people said to us hello. And yeah, let's start with agile modeling. What's agile modeling?
Yeah, so it was interesting. So agile modeling came out of some work I was doing with the extreme programming community. Must have been in 2000 or 2001. It was before the Agile Manifesto, so it's probably maybe it was 1999 actually. So, anyways, we were trying to answer the question: how do you approach modeling on an extreme programming team at the time? We called it extreme modeling. And we, I basically facilitated workshops around the world exploring how to do this and bringing in strategies that I'd seen work in practice. And then what happened? And then the Agile Manifesto got written and was published. And it was actually published. Well, anyway, so it doesn't matter. So it was published in 2001, and so what was interesting was it was actually Bob Martin pointed out that what we were calling extreme modeling at the time was about more than just XP. So his point, and it was about more than modeling too, actually, because documentation stuff creeped in. Couldn't disentangle it, just couldn't. And we tried, believe me, I tried. But anyways, so he pointed out that it's about more than just XP. So either we've got to scope it down a bit, or we need to rethink. It's like, given the scope, it needs a better name. So we ended up calling it Agile. And then he suggested that right now what you've really got is Agile modeling, not extreme modeling. Okay, Agile modeling, and then we stuck with that. So the goal of Agile modeling was to define strategies, ways of thinking, and ways of working to weave modeling and documentation strategies into Agile. Because at the time it wasn't clear, right? And the Agile world was just absolutely against modeling, because modeling was phenomenally dysfunctional. Like, it was all about case tools, you might not know what a case tool is anymore, but these complicated software-based engineering tools and these big complicated diagrams and UML and all and non-UML, all that good sort of stuff. And it was all about upfront design, and it was upfront requirements. It was really dysfunctional. So then, given the black and white thinking that we live with in the IT world, it's like, well, modeling is bad, right? So modeling bad, coding good, right? That's the level of thinking we had in the Agile community, and in some ways we still sort of do with some of the more novice people. But we said no. There's some value here. So we started writing up things like these wild ideas like sketching on whiteboards, which at the time was a wild idea. You could not find a book anywhere. I believe I wrote the first book that had hand-drawn whiteboard sketches published in a printed book. And that's the Agile modeling book, and sticky notes. Also a blatantly wild idea, like, other than in the user-centered design community, which eventually evolved into the UX community, or the CX community. Nobody was really talking about that either. So we popularized all those techniques, which then eventually got picked up by the rest of the world. But we also addressed things like, how does architecture and how do requirements fit into the Agile world? Because it's about more than just user stories. it's and architecture is about more than just a metaphor. Like, back in the day, the XP guys were running around saying, you don't really need to do any architecture work. You just need a metaphor. Yeah, metaphors are nice, but it doesn't get the job done. How does architecture modeling and experimentation and spikes and taking more of an iterative approach and a more of an evolutionary approach to architecture, how does that actually work in practice? So you should do some upfront thinking, some upfront architectural thinking, but you don't need to go. It's not like months or years of work. It could be hours or days of work. And since then, we've seen concepts like design sprints
Mhm.
come in. And it's not just and that term is totally wrong. It's not just a sprint. But anyways, you got to fit into the lexicon. But anyway, yeah. So good stuff there, and it's about more than just the UX stuff as well, which is something that that some of the design sprint people struggle with. You actually got to build stuff, and you should be worrying about planning and architecture as well as requirements and usability and all important things. And they all evolve together at pace.
And also, you mentioned the user stories, and maybe we can talk a bit about the user stories. Uh, yeah, I think lots of people's confusing about how to use that user stories. In some business, people are trying to create their backlog with that user stories. They are confusing about. So we need to write who, we need to write how, we need to write what, like that questions. But there is no answer in their side, and also they are discussing with the analysts or some development teams and IT teams. And I think in that user stories part, lots of people are confusing. What do you think about user stories?
Yeah. So user stories is one of many requirement techniques, and it's one and it's a good technique for what it does, but it's not sufficient. So sometimes you've got big stories. Well, okay, now we need epics. Sometimes you have data stuff to explore. Well, you're far better off doing data modeling than you are doing user stories. You're sometimes you have UX stuff. How's the what's the user interface going to look like? So you're better off doing sticky notes or sketches or prototyping, not user stories. So sometimes you have technical requirements like quality and security requirements, and yeah, you can sort of force fit that into user stories, but that's also nonsense as well, right? Because security requirements are ongoing efforts. It's not just a single story. You'd have to, and yes, you can break them up into smaller stories. But okay, so then I got a stream of like a billion, security stories that I've got to implement over time. Come on, right? So we need different techniques. So use the right, so just like, the metaphor I like to use is your toolkit, right? So in your toolkit, at home, you've got a box of tools or a rack of tools or something, right? So you got hammers and screwdrivers and saws and whatever else you got in there, because you need different tools for different jobs. Well, it's the exact same thing with requirements. You need different requirement types, different tools for different types of requirement jobs. And you use a combination, right? Like it's never just I'm gonna use a hammer to hammer a nail. Like, yeah, every so often I got an absolutely trivial job to do, and that's all I need is a hammer. But I was doing some work outside yesterday. I needed screwdrivers, I needed wrenches, a hammer, I needed a drill. Yeah, I had to go out and buy new drill bits because I blew it, broke a drill bit. All this sort of stuff, right? So I needed multiple tools to do a fairly simple job. And
Yeah.
that's just the way, that's why I have multiple tools in my toolkit, because I need the right tool, the right situation, for a given situation. I need the right combination of tools to the right extent at the right time. And of course, I need the skills to use all these tools to get the job done.
Okay.
It's
And
not
let's
just about
talk.
you.
Yeah. And let's talk about the agile architecture part. Yeah, what do you think about agile architecture, and also how can we improve our agility, not just technical agility, business agility with agile architecture?
Yeah. So, there's multiple aspects to this, right? So there's the process of how do I go about evolving an architecture in an agile manner, and that's what agile modeling is all about. So, you can do some upfront, sparse modeling, just barely good enough for the situation, and then let the details evolve over time. And because they will anyways, right? This is the reality on the ground. They will anyways. So, and particularly in the VUCA world that we're in, you don't have a lot of time to do this upfront thinking, and you don't want to, right? Because when things are changing quickly, doing a lot of upfront thinking of something that's about to change is naive. But that doesn't mean you don't do any thinking at all, right? And this is where I think the hackers really sort of blew it. It's not a black and white world, right? So we have to do some architectural thinking, and that thinking will evolve over time as we learn and as the situation changes. And fair enough. But the other aspect is how can we architect things that are easy to evolve over time, and how do we keep them? How do we keep that quality? So. And that's where I think a lot of the community has really fallen down, because the Agilists effectively moved away from architecture up front, and they sort of threw out the baby with the bathwater, right? So, it boils down to loose coupling, high cohesion. A lot of people point to the great work that Bob Martin has done around that, but the fundamental concepts are loose coupling and high cohesion, but also keeping the quality. So refactoring, when the quality drifts, and it will, refactoring and in all aspects of your architecture. Right? So there's been a huge focus on code quality, which is good, but what about data quality? So if you could have great code quality, but if your data is a mess, it doesn't really matter. I don't care. Oh, you've got pretty code. Good boy. Pat you on the head for that one. Your data sucks though, so you're sort of screwed, right? So you got to focus on the data stuff as well as on the coding stuff, and this is where most organizations have fallen down dramatically, and they've got huge data technical debt to deal with, and they have to, right? So I'm doing a lot of work in the AI space right now, and the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems, maybe the biggest problem, is the quality of data. So garbage in, garbage out. And in the AI space, the problem is the garbage in gets processed really quickly, and the feedback, and you get these nasty negative feedback loops. So, and we've seen examples of this, right? So, a while ago, DeepMind, the company that Google owns, pointed one of their AIs at a Republican discussion forum, and within a day and a half, it was a raving racist. It was got to kill everybody and all that sort of stuff, right? Because it was garbage in, garbage out. These garbage opinions, and they just kept this nasty feedback loop. It happens all the time, and so anyway, the failure rate on AI efforts is huge right now, because they get hung up on the data. It's not really, it's not the AI engines and things like that. It's the data. The quality of your corporate data is no good. So you're just not in a position right now to do any of this stuff. Same thing with data-driven. There's a lot of talk about the data-driven decisions. Well, if your data is no good, your decisions will be no good. And there's other issues there too, but certainly data quality is one of them. So anyway, to get to your question, so what's Agile data? Agile data addresses how do you approach the data aspects of particularly development, but also in some ways of operations in an Agile manner, because it is possible. And so the data community for years have pitched this story that they're special, that they can't be Agile because data, blah, 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 blah. Completely and utterly false. So the challenge is, yes, it's harder in the data space. So because of data, without a data, because you can't break the data, right? It's not like, when you go to refactor code, if you refactor something and your tests don't run, not a big deal, right? You go back, back out of it and you fix it, or, you do whatever, not a big deal. If I refactor a database and I make a mistake and I break the data, there could be legal consequences. I could kill people. Say I break medical data. I mess up somebody's medical data. That's a serious problem. So you got to be a little more, you got to be a little smarter. You can still do it, but it's a different game. And so on the Agile data site, I walk through, here's how you do database refactoring. Here's what it means to do continuous integration with data, because it's not as simple as CI with code, because you can't break the data. Same thing with continuous deployment. reasonably more difficult because of databases. And yeah, there's nice technologies. Some of the the NoSQL databases are sort of cool, but most organizations have still got Oracle or DB2 or SQL Server or Azure Data, whatever it's called now. But yeah, they're still dealing with all these legacy data sources, and so yeah, it's like it's not enough to say, well, Liquidbase has got a really good database refactoring strategy. Yes, it does, but most of your corporate data is not in Liquidbase, is it? So, interesting point, but not really relevant to the actual conversation we need to have. So anyways, yeah, so given those really nasty constraints, how do you do agile with data stuff? And that's what we answered in the agile data method. It's interesting. So, and that's all being picked up now. There's movement around data ops. Data DevOps would actually be the proper name for that, but data ops sounds easy, sounds nicer from a marketing point of view. But yeah, so we're finally starting to see some traction in that space, which is great. The challenge, though, of course, is it's really hard work. I was just on a call earlier today with somebody working in a consulting firm, and they were working with a large organization, and they had a project just grind to a halt because of their data technical debt. And it was going to be multiple years to fix, to get the data to the point where they could do what they wanted to do. And it just is what it is. Like, that's just hard work. Suck it up, Buttercup. You got to do it. And so my advice would be, yeah, get on that path now, because the longer you wait to fix your data, the worse the problem's going to be.
Okay. And yeah, how can we connect that DevOps and data? And you give some information, but can you give maybe more information about how can we connect that DevOps part and data part?
Yeah, so a lot of it is just recognizing that, like, so all the tech, so if you're familiar with DevOps, all the DevOps
Mhm.
strategies, then the easy answer is, well, just insert the word data or database in all of those names, and that's what you need to do. Yeah, I'm being facetious, but that basically is the first step. But the real step is realizing, well, wait a minute. Now that I'm dealing with data and not just code, and almost always dealing with data and code, because if you look at Oracle, in Oracle you store data, but you also have functionality. You have stored procedures and functions and triggers and good stuff like that. So you have both code and data. Yeah, lucky you. So anyway, and you can't deal with that. Is what it is. So yeah, so you've got issues along the line. Oh, and you can't break the database. So say when it comes to database refactoring. So Pramod Sandalaj and I wrote a book about 15 years ago now, called Refactoring Databases. And how do you do this database refactoring thing? So we wrote the book from the point of view of a database, a production database, being accessed by 100 different systems. And 100 is not a magic number. It could be 1,000, could be 1,000,000. It doesn't matter. By the time you get past 2 or 3 in the data world, it doesn't really matter anymore, because it's a mess. So it's written, being accessed by 100 different systems, all running on 100 different platforms, owned by 100 different teams. One team is mine. The other 99 teams, not mine. I have no control over them. And there's no magical tool across these teams. No magic can occur, right? Just the typical nasty data situation that we all face. In that world, completely utterly nasty, completely real. Oh, and I'm not allowed to rewrite everything all at once and release it into production. Too risky, right? So no magic whatsoever. So in that really reasonably nasty world, which almost all of our organizations face, it's still absolutely trivial to refactor a database if you know what you're doing. And then the book is basically a reference manual walking you through a little over 60 potential database refactorings with full source code for how to implement them. Because I actually introduced database refactoring a couple years earlier in the Agile Database Techniques book, and had a chapter on it. And then the response to that was, well, you don't know what you're doing, and this is naive, and it's only for little systems, and blah blah blah. So then to respond to that, we wrote the Refactoring Databases book to basically take all the mystery. So if you've got the ability to type in code from a book And this is not complicated code. The other thing that we did when we wrote the book was we said we can't use any special database features. So if Oracle has a really cool feature, or Liquibase has not that it was not that it was around at the time, but if Oracle has a really cool feature that's only an Oracle thing, we couldn't use it. So with that, because then it doesn't, then it wouldn't really matter anymore, right? So with that constraint, the code is all fairly simple. It's alter table, DDL, DML, all fairly simple stuff. So if you can type in code from a book, you can do this too. Now there's tools. Now you don't have to type in a code from a book anymore. There's tools to do this, but at the time you had to hand jam everything. So we took, and it was interesting. And then the conversation, like, all the whining in the data community stopped dead once that book came out, because it's like, here we're showing you how to do it. Type in code from a book, and it's like 20 lines. It's not like here's 15 pages of stuff you need to do. Here's like 20 lines of code that's well spaced, well formatted 20 lines of code. Not a big deal.
Okay, and many thanks. That's great information, because lots of time we are just talking about agiles and frameworks, but I think we need to talk about that topics, and that's are important topics, and that's our architecture, modeling, data is very important topics, and I'm happy to talk about that topics. And before we close the session, again, this is the standard for our format. I need your suggestions for the companies and for the individual level. What's your suggestions? Maybe 3 suggestions for each one, individuals and for the companies.
Okay, I'll start. I guess I'll start with individuals. So for individuals, I'm a firm believer in being a lifelong learner. And this is what I'm actually, like I said earlier, I think I'm in the process of going back to school for another master's. So be a lifelong learner. Think outside the box, because you are in a box. We're all in boxes. We all have our way of looking at the universe, and sort of question what you're being told. Be a critical thinker, I guess, would be my third my third observation. Because there's a lot of rhetoric out there. There's a lot of religious stuff going on in the Agile community. Look into the background of some of the gurus is all I'll say there. But because it works, it's these marketing, these quasi-religious marketing pitches that we get work. People have gotten rich. Why not? Be smart. Think outside the box and be a critical thinker. For organizations, I would say start where you are. So because you don't have any choice, but so start explicitly recognize that you need to start where you are, and where you are might be here, and where you want to get to is probably over here, and that's a multi-year journey, and it really is a never-ending journey, because what you really want to do. So my second piece of advice is you want to become a purposeful learning organization. So purposeful, I hope you're doing something good for the rest of the world, for the rest of the community. Some organizations do that. Some organizations, unfortunately, don't do that. So I hope you're purposeful, but certainly be a learning organization. Always be striving to get better. Always be striving to improve. So it's not just about adopting a framework. That might be part of your overall strategy, but that might be the first step to get you on this learning journey. But be willing to go. So I guess that's my third piece of advice for organizations is if you do start with adopting a framework like Scrum or SAFe or whatever, good. I hope it works or mostly works for you. But realize that it's only a starting point. The goal is not to adopt SAFe. The goal is not to adopt Scrum. Their goal might be to get you to adopt SAFe or Scrum, because that's how they make money. But it shouldn't be your goal. Your goal should be to really become a purposeful learning organization, and that means that Scrum or SAFe or less or whatever you've just adopted might help break the logjam in your organization. It might help you get going, but it certainly cannot possibly be your final destination. It can't be. right? Because your situation will change. Because if you've made a good decision, if if you've made a good decision in whatever that framework is, if it fits well right now for you, great. Let's assume I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. I'm going to assume you've made a good decision. Your situation is going to change, guaranteed, guaranteed. So what is a good decision today will not be such a good decision a few months or a few years from now. So you've got to be prepared to evolve, and that means you need to up your game, and you may just improve on whatever framework you've adopted, or you may completely and utterly evolve away from it over time, and that's okay. Be pragmatic. Do what's best for you, not what's convenient for whoever's selling you services.
And also in one of my session, David Henderson said, I take that note, said to me, if you are doing something good, you don't need to drop it. You need to, yeah, I think that's a good point to mention the start where you are. For example, lots of companies is saying there's no project work. We need to change the product work. Okay, we are okay, but in that company, if there is lots of project experts and the companies is muscles is project based is working with project based, you don't need to drop directly to project based to start with product based. Maybe, yeah, I think be pragmatic will come in the second way, but
and that's it, right? So there's ample opportunity for a project-based approach even in the IT space. Maybe not as much as in, say, the physical construction space, but yeah, sometimes doing a project makes sense. Sometimes taking a product-based approach makes sense. Sometimes doing some sort of exploratory lean startup approach makes sense. So choose the right way of, the best way of working for you right now, given your situation. One size does not fit all. So all these people saying that you're running around saying, projects are evil, projects are dead. Thank you for sharing your bigotry, because that's all you're really doing. That's all you're doing. Because I've never seen an organization that's not a hybrid. Any decent size, maybe I've seen a few small startups, but that are only doing one thing. But every organization I've ever worked in works. They've got different teams working in different ways because they're in different situations. So allow your teams to do the best they can in the situation that they face. And that means sometimes there'll be a Scrum-based team, sometimes it'll be a Kanban type of team, sometimes it'll be a SAFe type of an effort, sometimes it'll be project effort, and that's okay. But as leaders, you need to be prepared to enable and help those teams and govern and guide those teams appropriately. So the flexibility gets put. The need for flexibility is even greater in these organizations that are really striving to become learning organizations. Do the right thing. Do the best you can in the situation you face, and always try to get better.
I think that's a great message. So yeah, we are coming to the end of our session, and I took lots of notes again. And thank you, Scott, to accept my invitation and to share your knowledge, to share that great information. And thank you, our attendees and participants. And this in the next session, not next Wednesday. The next session will be in this Sunday with Ellen. So see you and have a good day and have a good night for all our participants and Scott.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye bye.